Hare Krishna, Bhagavad Prabhupada.
We will be starting with a quick kirtan. As dictated by Srila Prabhupada, we always chant the Jaya Radha Madhava prayers before we start any sort of katha. So we will do so in following what Srila Prabhupada did. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Yashodanandana Vrajanarandana Yashodanandana Vrajanarandana Yamunatira Vanachari Munatira Vanachari Munatira Vanachari Munatira Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madan Mohan Radha Madan Mohan Jaya Radha Madan Mohan Radha Madan Mohan Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada
Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. One time, for 1 sec, just arranging things. Haribol, Dandavat, Hare Krishna. So we'll start our class today. Thank you all for joining.
Prabhu, do you want me to bring the Mangalacharan PDF?
Prabhu, we'll do it. I have.
We'll do it. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the offer. So, Dandavat, everyone. I hope you can see my screen. Prabhu, Ashramada Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu, we can see.
All glories to everyone who joined, and all glories to you, Ashramada Prabhu, for helping me out here in your service. I'll start with your permission. So, we did the Jayarada Madhava, we did the Hare Krishna. It's Srila Prabhupada mantra. So, let's just go back to Srila Prabhupada mantra and then we'll start. So, Namam. And I request everyone to, you can unmute and join. If you have under shelter, or if you have an initiated guru from whom you have taken initiation, you can take their mantra in your mind, and then we can start with Srila Prabhupada mantra. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaurvani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunivadi Paschate Desatarine Om Agyanti Virandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksharon Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhestam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yudapadakamalam Shri Guru Navaishtavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Tam Sajivam Sadhavatam Savadutam Prajnasaitam Krishna Chaitanya Deva Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpade Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapte Kanchana Gaurangi Dhade Vrindavaneshwari Prashavanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vancha Kalpatrubhacha Gapasidu Bevacha Patitadam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So today's topic is verses 62 and 63 from chapter 2 of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So we'll begin with just reading those books. So 2.62. Like you can repeat after me. We start with the Sanskrit part. So 262. Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsa Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsa Sangasteshu Pajayate Sangasteshu Pajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kama Sangat Sanjayate Kama Kamat Krodho Vijayate Kamat Krodho Vijayate. So, the synonyms quickly. Dhyayata, while contemplating Vishayan, sense objects, Pumsa, of a person. Sangha, attachment, Teshu, in the sense objects, Upajayate, develops. Sangat, from attachment, Sanjayate, develops. Kama, desire. Kamat, from desire, Koda, anger, Abhijayate, become manifest. Translation by His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada Ki Jai. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. Purport. Prabhu, I think it would be good if we can all participate. Does anyone want to read the purport?
I can read, Prabhu.
Yeah, please go ahead, Prabhu. Thank you.
purport by Srila Prabhupada. One who is not Krishna conscious is subjected to material desires while contemplating the objects of the senses. The senses require real engagements, and if they are not engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, they will certainly seek engagement in the service of materialism. In the material world, everyone, including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to say nothing of other demigods in the heavenly planets, is subjected to the influence of sense objects. The only method to get out of this puzzle of material existence is to become Krishna conscious. Lord Shiva was deep in meditation, but when Parvati agitated him for sense pleasure, he agreed to the proposal, and as a result, Kartikeya was born. When Haridas Thakur was a young devotee of the Lord, he was similarly allured by the incarnation of Maya Devi. But Haridas easily passed the test because of his unalloyed devotion to Lord Krishna. As illustrated in the above mentioned verse of Sri Yamunacharya, a sincere devotee of the Lord shuns all material sense enjoyment due to his higher taste for spiritual enjoyment in the association of the Lord. That is the secret of success. One who is not, therefore, in Krishna consciousness, however powerful he may be in controlling the senses by artificial repression, is sure ultimately to fail. For the slightest thought of sense pleasure will agitate him to gratify his desires.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Can you still see the screen, Prabhu?
Yes.
And you're seeing the browser only, right?
No, I can see the screen.
Okay. The reason
the browser, yes, the browser, I can.
Yeah, actually I have the Hindi Bhagavad Gita open. So I was just looking for some of the words which kind of a little stand out or conspicuous. So I was thinking we can just go through those words. But thank you for reading, Prabhuji. So if you notice some words over here, and we are doing like a preliminary approach to Bhagavad Gita over here. So since this is English BG class, we'll just go through those words. So one thing is, conspicuous, what are these objects of senses? And the second thing is, it is mentioned that in contemplating. So what exactly is contemplating all about? Contemplation is, we can think deep about, but the right word in the Hindi BG is given as chintan. So over here in Sanskrit is mentioned as Krishna speaking dhyayata. So basically, when the chintan is different than chinta, chintan is where you go deep into thought process, mostly philosophical, but basically when you're trying to evaluate various cons, pros, and deeper aspects of everything, invariably that requires intelligence and not just mind here. So as Krishna says, right, the soul has various coverings: false ego, intelligence, mind, then the senses, and the gross body. So invariably, contemplating means going deep into certain aspect. So that's one thing. Another aspect is this attachment, asakti is there, and then lust develops, and then so lust has been evaluated as kama, and kama is lust doesn't really correctly describe the English word, but kama is a very appropriate term in terms of what it really represents. So I think over here most of the words are easy. The one thing to note over here is Krishna says, so when Haridas Thakur was being talked about, right? So Lord Shiva is being mentioned as someone who actually succumbed, right? But Haridas Thakur did not succumb. And it could be mentioned that how is Haridas Thakur, who being a jiva, and Lord Shiva being Lord himself, right? Even though he's 55 qualities, right? So the question is that why would Haridas Thakur prevail over where Lord Shiva failed? So I just request everyone to contemplate, do chintan, and give out what their things are, that how come Haridas Thakur was not allured where Lord Shiva was allured? Does that mean that Jiva or Jiva Tattva is higher than Lord Shiva? So anyone want to share any thoughts on that? No, that's okay.
Generally speaking, jivas are in the lower status than Shiva Tattva. Jiva Tattva is lower status.
You're right, Prabhu. Yeah, 50 qualities, 55, 60, and 64, right? So that is exactly the question. This looks like a contradiction. It is okay if Haridas Thakur did not fail, but why would Lord Shiva fail? And right, why is that comparison given? So my understanding is that Lord Shiva being Lord, obviously he should not fail. But then this is part of the Leela, right? Because if he doesn't fail over there, then Kartikeya will not get born. And as part of Leela, the Ishvara Tattva, the controllers, right? I mean, there are many kinds of controllers. All the demigods are controllers, and then the Mahadevtas are controllers, the three devs, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, and of course, all the Vishnu Tattvas. So they may do many things that may look inappropriate, but then that is acceptable. And in various circumstances, they will be acceptable. For example, in the Mohini Roop, when Lord Shiva got enraptured, right? That is Yogmaya working. And Yogmaya working can trick, it's acceptable to trick. Even Balaram did not understand Krishna's yoga potency when all that Brahma Vimohan Leela and all the cows were replaced by Krishna, right? He could guess that something is going on, but it was not obvious to him that. So it's okay for Leela's purposes. Many things can go on. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that in Chaitanya Charitamrita it is mentioned that Krishna's superiority is being shown, that how the Ishvara Tattva, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, because they interact with Maya at various degrees, they are considered relatively, I won't say contamination is the right word, but not as perfect or as perfectly perfect as Krishna. So from that point of view, because Lord Shiva plays with tamas, that's one way to differentiate. So definitely something is going on when Lord Shiva gets involved, and he does go for all the other things that a typical pure devotee may not want to go for sustenance, for destruction. He participates. So one of them is when he drinks the Kalkut wish, right? So it's absolutely acceptable. It doesn't show that Lord Shiva is lower, but this is exactly the kind of situations where people get deluded and they come out with their own interpretations, and therefore Vedic system has, as much as the population of India, as many interpretations exist in the world now. So the next thing is that this verse of Yamunacharya has been mentioned. I don't think we'll have time, so yeah, we can probably go ahead. Okay, so another conspicuous word over here was with unalloyed devotion. So I think first is that Haridas passed the test not because he's a devotee of Krishna, but because he's an unalloyed devotee of Krishna. What does unalloyed aspect come into picture? When you notice Krishna consciousness and compared to just consciousness, or basically Brahmbhuyaya stage, right? What is it that we say it's a higher experience, like the Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan? Why is the Brahman experience higher, but gives more bliss? Why does it give more bliss? Because there is a superlative concept over there. And where's that aspect coming in? Well, I think you can describe in 3 words: unalloyed, unmotivated, and unstinted. Unalloyed means that there is no ulterior motive, right? And unstinted means there's no breaks. I may do excellent service for some time, and then after that I take a break and do something else, and I come back and do it. I met once a devotee. He was in one of the impersonal circuits, but they are bhakti oriented. And he said that about 20-30 years back in New York, he would go along with the Hare Krishnas, and for 1 week they would chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and Kirtan for 7 days in a row. I mean, obviously he'll take breaks and sleep or something. But you see what is happening over there. Even though he was into it, he ended up not pursuing Krishna Bhakti as we've read it or we can understand. And obviously the reason is that it's not that his motive was unaligned. At that point of time he was young. I don't think he really had any ulterior motive, but was not unstinted. It had breaks. He did 7 days. He thought he did something great. And then he took a break, and then he did whatever else he wanted to do in material life. So that is another aspect about things to be in a superlative level. So unalloyed, unstinted, unmotivated. All of those 3 things are there. One is internal, motivation is external, alloyed is internal in your heart. We have unstinted is continuous, right? So that is one aspect, conspicuous aspect over here. And I apologize, I'm going into some levels of detail, and the audience over here is very elevated. But just from the perspective of a basic BG class, I'm just going into some basic concepts. The other thing over here, if you notice, unalloyed devotion and anything. I think over here, artificial repression. So if you notice, I mean, in Krishna consciousness, we don't do repression. The number of do's are mostly and there, and the don'ts are very less. The 4 regulative principles at eye level, and checking yourself against some of the negative reactions if they come, right? Some anger comes, you can suppress it at that point of time or try to avoid it or run away, some Vaishnava offenses. But basically, is Krishna conscious more about do's rather than don'ts, right? But there are a lot of yogis, especially coming from North India, where I come from, especially the Kumbh Mela is held there, like I come from Prayagraj. A whole gang of all of these Jatadhari people come down from Himalayas and they'll travel to Prayagraj now. Ultimately, earlier it was called Allahabad. And they would go into many kinds of artificial repression. I have seen with my own eyes people who dig like in the where the river Ganges and Yamuna meet at Triveni Sangam. There's sand over there, and they would dig hole and put their head in, and like an ostrich, their head is like that covered under sand. I don't know how they're breathing, but maybe they have a hole there or whatever. But at least from outside, their head is so much inside, and they have a big cloth over there, and they're expecting someone to give some bhiksham dehi, right? So people go through many kind of austerities. But even Lord Buddha, the one who Bhagavatam says clearly is an incarnation, who did not exactly propound the Krishna consciousness because he had a different motive, ulterior motive, spiritually ulterior motive. Actually, even he, when he was left his wife and kid sleeping and walked off to Himalayas, at that point of time, he was trying various things out. So initially, he tried Jainism. Jainism is very strong in terms of austerity. And he'd grown very thin and he'd fallen sick. And one time he was near a river and there was a boatsman. And then the boatsman had a junior who was helping row the boat. And he heard that something very loud, which Lord Buddha took it as an instruction for himself. So what the boatman was telling is, hey, don't row the boat too hard. Don't row the boat too slow or too loose. Just keep it in the middle. Be in the middle path. And when the boatman said that, the captain of the boat, Lord Buddha heard that and he figured out maybe I'm doing too much austerity. And that is around that point of time when he left Jainism and came out with his own middle fold path and tried to practice it and ultimately went to Gaya. And so the story goes on. But anyway, so artificial repression, definitely not Krishna conscious. Middle path is the recommended path because it's not by body that you are going to get spiritual perfection. Body is just a vehicle, mind is vehicle, intelligence is vehicle, false ego is a realization tier, it too is a vehicle. It is at the soul level that Krishna conscious start, and it obviously ends with a relationship. So three golden rules: I'm not body, I'm soul. Second rule, there is a God and I am not it. So there's the first realization of that there is a higher power which is supreme. And the third level, which is there is a sweet loving relationship between God and me. And that sweet relationship ultimately at its highest level manifests as Krishna consciousness. So while all of these tiers that we talked about, Mana, Indriya, Buddhi, Aham, these are all vehicles to transfer us, but they are not means and end. They are just the means and you utilize them, but Krishna consciousness zips through them. So including artificial repression, we don't want to delve into too much of any of these don'ts. We want to stay in the middle path. So I think these are some of the conspicuous path that I found. This is a very peculiar word called in Hindi, Ranch Matra Vichar. In English, it is not so exciting to read, slightest thought of sense pleasure, but Ranch Mat is a relatively cool, you can say, a Sanskrit slang, if for lack of a better word, but that even slightest thought, basically it is Krishna consciousness is the path for perfection. So perfection is not acceptable. Perfects are siddhis, and siddhis go into Siddhalok, and at best you can go to Brahmalok, but that's about it. So Krishna consciousness start beyond that. So yeah, if you see a lot of the words just in this verse, as with many other Srila Prabhupada's purports, talk about the superlative aspect, the comparative aspect of how to differentiate, not because something is better or not better, is because you're compromising or short selling ourselves. And in the path of Krishna consciousness, we don't want to short sell ourselves. We want to go for the cream. And why do we want to go for the cream? The reason is not because we want it, it's because Krishna, that is the bar at which we can serve Krishna. Anything lower than that, you don't serve it. For example, even in ISKCON temples, when you do the Aarti and Puja, that is not going to Krishna, even though we are serving Krishna statue. Vigraha, and another Andi Vigraha is taken by Lakshmi Narasimha. So only when you reach that platform of Bhava and beyond, that the first ray of prema strikes, and that's when real Krishna consciousness begins. So we are on a journey, and this journey is very important to realize the superlative aspects. Otherwise, very easy to digress and reach a very high stage from where we are. But from the top, it is still a very low stage. So some concepts over here. We can go on to the next verse, Prabhu. I'm sorry, I'm trying to hurry, but so we'll go into the verse and please repeat after me. You can do the Sanskrit. Let me just find out any difficult words here. Krodad, Samohat, Bramshad, Praschati. Okay. Yeah, let's please repeat after me. Krodad bhavati sammoha.
Krodhad bhavati sammoha.
Sammohat smriti vibramaha. Sammohat smriti vibramaha. Smriti bhramshad buddhinasho. Smriti bhramshad buddhinasho. Buddhinashat pranashyati. Buddhinashat pranashyati. Synonyms. Krodhat, from anger. Bhavati, takes place. Sammoha, perfect illusion. Sammohat, from illusion. Smriti, of memory. Vibrama, bewilderment. Smriti bhramshat, after bewilderment of memory. Buddhinasha, loss of intelligence. Buddhinashat, from loss of intelligence. Panaschati, one falls down. Translation by His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. So next sequence continues. So we ended over here with anger. From lust, anger rises, and then Krishna continues. From anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. And when memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So, purport, could someone else like to read? Otherwise, Prabhuji, if you like to read, Srimad Prabhu.
Yeah, Prabhu, I can read.
Sure, Prabhuji. Good.
Purport by Divine Grace Sri Prabhupada. Srila Rupa Goswami has given us this direction. Prapanchikataya buddhya harisambandhi vasuna.
Sure, that's okay. Yeah.
Mumukshu bihi parityago vairagyam falgu katyate. By development of Krishna consciousness, one can know that everything has its use in the service of the Lord. Those who are without knowledge of Krishna consciousness artificially try to avoid material objects, and as a result, although they desire liberation from material bondage, they do not attain to the perfect stage of renunciation. Their so-called renunciation is called falgu, or less important. On the other hand, a person in Krishna consciousness knows how to use everything in the service of the Lord. Therefore, he does not become a victim of material consciousness. For example, for an impersonalist, the Lord or the Absolute, being impersonal, cannot eat, whereas an impersonalist tries to avoid good eatables. A devotee knows that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer and that he eats all that is offered to him in devotion. So after offering good eatables to the Lord, the devotee takes the remnants called prasadam. Thus, everything becomes spiritualized, and there is no danger of a downfall. The devotee takes prasadam in Krishna consciousness, whereas the non-devotee rejects it as material. The impersonalist therefore cannot enjoy life due to his artificial renunciation. And for this reason, a slight agitation of the mind pulls him down again into the pool of material existence. It is said that such a soul, even though rising up to the point of liberation, falls down again due to his not having support in devotional service.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you. So, what I'll do is I'll just go back to my Hindi Bhagavad Gita, and where I have some words which I think are conspicuous. So, one thing is, if you notice over here, one is prapanchikataya buddhya. Buddhya is obviously intelligence, but what is prapanchikataya? Prapanchikataya means of prapancha. Whenever there is an extra a sound, then in Sanskrit that means of. So prapanchika is basically related to material world. For example, there is a prapanchika Vaikuntha too, and that is the place where they say that when Amrish Maharaj and Durvasa Muni's story is there at engagement, and when Durvasa Muni reached Vaikuntha, how did you reach? So there are many explanations given, but the one that is the most prominent, or amongst the most prominent said is that it's a Vaikuntha that exists in the material world, and therefore it is possible for Durva Samuni to reach out there. Otherwise, you have to be a devotee, right, to be able to reach Vaikuntha. So that's one. So that's one important concept over here. Then another one over here is there are so-called renunciations called Falgu, or less important. So I mean, this verse we know, I think, from our other studies, but this word less important is actually in the Hindi Bhagavad Gita is mentioned as Gona. And the beauty about the word Gona is that there are two vrittis. There's a Mukhya vritti and a Gona vritti. What does basically mean? It means that if something is Mukhya, means is the primary one, right? And if something is Gona, means it is secondary or subsidiary. For example, if there's something is a preferred meaning, right, direct meaning based on dictionary, then it is called Mukhya vritti. And Gona is like indirect meaning, like speculation based, right? So, for example, I'm not showing you right now, but in CCRD 710, it is mentioned that Shankaracharya is not at fault because he's under the order of Supreme Personality of Godhead, that he has covered the real purport of the Vedas, right? So, what meaning is coming out from Shankaracharya's writings, even though he is a perfect devotee, but he's not behaving like one, is Gona vritti. Another way to understand this is some of the incarnations, like Sakteshwar avatars, they are Mukhya, right? 4 Kumaras, Narada, Maharaj Pithu, Parashuram, right? And then they are God incarnations, right? They're called Vibhutis. So they're like in the Bhagavad Gita chapter 10, many Vibhutis are mentioned, right? So they are all there. Another aspect about the God and Mukhya are, for example, some names of Krishna, they are primary, and obviously they lead to quicker, faster, more efficient results if you're going for Krishna consciousness. If you're just going for Mukti, they probably are as equally good. So some of Krishna's primary names would be Govinda, Gopala, Rama, all of those names, Radhanath, Hari, Yashomati, Pranadhan, Madan Mohan, Shyam Sundar. But the God names would be like Jagannatha, Shrishtikarta, Jagatpati, Paramatma, right? So one, they are generic in nature, right? And then actually Bhaktivinoda Thakur even talks about something at third level. We're kind of digressing. He talks about Madhurya names. So anyway, so this was just a concept I thought it was related over here, because it is mentioned that the vairagya that people do if they don't dedicate everything to Krishna, it is covered with the tinge of materialism, of Falgu. Okay, that's one. Another concept over here is, this one is there. I mean, I think somewhere over here, Krishna says, I'm the supreme enjoyer, right? Yeah, he's a supreme enjoyer. So, I mean, we know those verses from Bhagavad Gita. I might be able to pull up. Bhaktaram Yaktapasam Sarlok Maheshwar Sudam Sarvbhutanam, right? So he says that I am the ultimate beneficiary, right? Bhakta. So Bhakta means beneficiary. And I think is the next verse after this, or Updashtanumanta cha Bharta Bhakta. So Bharta Bhakta here, Krishna Prabhupada is transferred as supreme enjoyer, Bharta Bhakta. Bharta can actually have other meanings also, but Krishna Prabhupada is transferred as a transcendental enjoyer, who is the supreme proprietor, existing overseas permitter. But I think so, Krishna has been ascribed a term as supreme enjoyer over here. Okay, so those are the two things that are there. Let me see if there's anything else in this purport that actually, one more thing, I think, concept. So if you notice over here, so for example, for an impulse, the Lord being impulse cannot eat, whereas an impulse try to avoid good fare, a devotee was Krishna. So after offering good eatables to a Lord, a devotee takes on eminence called prasada. Once again, please notice, dear devotees, the superlative concept. It is not that by offering eatables to the Lord, not even after offering vegetarian food to the Lord, not offering 927 advised items to the Lord. He's saying good eatables. Why the good eatables are being mentioned? Because once again, superlative aspect comes into picture, that we offer, we serve, and we are in love, or at least we fake it to make it, as Vasika Maharaj says. The good eatables, we try to give our best to the Lord, right? And in return, what you get is higher than what you get on your own, right? So the myopic view of life, we try to do things for ourselves, and will not yield any results anywhere near when you give everything to Krishna, and then whatever left is will be much more than, right? So another superlative concept over here, good eatables, or it is said acha bhojan, right? Okay, so those dear devotees were the concepts that I think were there. And now, if you notice, this verse, these two verses, actually are talking about no, something that's not good, right? The negative aspect about things. If you notice the setting where this is happening is Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, and Arjuna has asked to stop the Rath in the middle. In fact, why don't we launch into understanding what is the context or sandarbha that this is being said, these two verses, right? So we read through the verses purport, we kind of have the basic understanding, but let's go into this warning. Why does this warning come into picture? What is the sandarbha or the context behind the scenes? So I'm going to close this and let me open up next level. Okay, so just like, in all the Hindu yagyas or any anushthan, there's a sankalpa. Brahma honi ni adhyay, and it goes like this, that in Brahma's second day, prarabdha, second prarabdha, in the first day, and in which kalpa, and so you do all of those as part of the Vishal Sankalpa, right? Similarly, we are going, and that is what it is. Essentially, a Sankalpa is a bearing of where I am in relation to Lord Brahma, who is supposed to be officially the head of this our material universe, and with respect to his lifespan and to the geographical position, so time, place, circumstance wise, where do I sit? Similarly, these two verses, where do they sit in the concept? So these are part of Mahabharata, and Mahabharata, as we know, is spoken by Vedvyas and written by Lord Ganesha. And in the they are spoken in the 23rd to 40th chapter. I think there's a called Bhishma Parv. And in the Bhishma Parv, that is the what sandarbha, right? And then we'll go into the why kab sandarbha. That means what is the time span. So the Bhagavad Gita is the chapter number 23 to 40 in the Bhishma, which is the sixth part of Mahabharata, right? Then let's go to the next one. So this is being said in the second half. The first day, Kalpa, is the day of Brahma, right? So the first day, 20 this is the seventh mantra, if I'm right. Prabhu, if correct me if I'm wrong. And in this Divyuga, and in this Divyuga, right, in the Kali Yuga, sorry?
You are right, yeah, it's seventh.
It is the seventh, right? So each mantra is 71 million years. It's very beautiful how they are arranged, but we'll digress if we go into this. But one thing to note over here, there is sannyas between each of the yugas, and sannyas 10%. It's amazing calculation how everything adds up, right? They are not even numbered or regular numbered or nice numbered like 10 multiple, how our Kali Yuga people have defined world, right? Like 14 mantra is because the lifespan of a demigod is 100 times that of a Satyuga person, which is 1,000 times that of Kali Yuga person. And if you calculate all of that, right, how beautifully it aligns towards 100 years of Brahma, which is the 311 trillion years. Anyway, once again, we're digressing, sir. Okay, so one thing is that when did this Kali Yuga start? So it is mentioned, if you just look at this, there is this, the Devi Panchratra Panchanga from South India. And this is the Shaka Samvat, 1942, 1943, in the year 2020-21. So I think it's the 57 or 57 year difference, I think, or 54, forgetting, with Shaka Samvat. And with Vikram Samvat, it is 76, 77. Anyway, it clearly mentions that Kali Yuga started 5,121 years, which is about what is also calculated by current Pandits, or from even by Aryabhatta, that it's like 13th or 18th Feb 3102 is when Mahabharata war was fought. And then a few years after that is when Krishna left the planet. And that's when Kali Yuga started, right? So we have given the Kab Sandarbha, when is these verses spoken. Now let's go into the location Sandarbha. So obviously it was spoken in Kurukshetra, right? And Kurukshetra is a holy land north of Delhi in Asia, in Jambu Dvipe, Bhatkhande. So we talked about that. And then what is the Sandarbha of why this is being done? So obviously there's a fight between Pandavas and Kauravas for their right. And then we go to the and the juncture, that the location is when Arjuna asks Krishna to put his chariot in between. And then who are the people involved? Obviously Krishna and Damodar, Arjuna and Madhusudana, Krishna, right? So, and that Krishna is who watches there. So, and then in Bhagavad Gita that is spoken, there are three sections, for lack of better words. And these three sections are the 6 chapters each. And the first 6 chapters can be called as karma leading to renunciation or vairagya. And the middle section is bhakti yoga. And the last 6 chapters are jnana, so yoga of knowledge. So I think that's how it is said. And why are these 3 sections important? Because it is said that Bhakti Devi has 2 sons, Gyan and Vairagya. Right? 2 sons of Bhakti, Gyan and Vairagya. There's a big story around that. But anyway, so this is the sandarbha, the context in which this is spoken. Right? And now let's go on to the next level of sandarbha of within this chapter, how these 2 verses align themselves. Right? So let's go on to the chapter now. And we start with the standard introduction or summation to each of the chapters. So, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Upsupnisatsu, Param Vidyayam, Yog Shastre, Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade, Sankhya Yoga Nama. So, this chapter has been given many names, but Arth Dvitiya Adhyaya. So, this Dvitiya Adhyaya, second Adhyaya, has been given various names. If you notice Bhagavad, if you notice the name given by Srila Prabhupada versus other authors. So Srila Prabhupada has given this as Gita ka Sar, right? It is the summary content of Bhagavad Gita. However, Vrindavan, so Vrindavan Das Thakur has given it a different name. He is calling it as Atman Atma Viveka Yoga. So it is basically equal of Bheda. Bheda is distinguishing soul from body. And Srila Prabhupada has called that as the summation of the entire content. And then there comes the concept why this 2 different names are given. Because from Srila Prabhupada, he is actually catering to a segment of people who are way lower, right? Whereas our acharyas, depending on who their target audience was giving it out to different audience or cliently. So that is the name. And the other name that is given is Sankhya Yoga. So 3 different names for 3 different acharyas. Okay. And then now we'll go into the next. So this chapter 2 starts with after chapter 1. And the chapter 1, Arjuna has given 4 reasons not to fight. Daya is compassion, bhog, sense enjoyment. And papa or sins, right? And then kulnas, destroy family traditions. And Krishna is using this chapter 2 to summarily answer all of those objections raised by Krishna. So if you divide this chapter 2 now further, so first 10 verses, further doubts and surrender. So that's when Arjuna surrenders, Krishna starts, right? And then 11 to 30th verse is replying to compassion through jnana information. And then from 31 to 38 is replying to the enjoyment objection from Arjuna by through karma kanda principles. Hey, even if you lose, what happens? You'll go getting paramgati, you'll go to heaven, and if you win, you'll enjoy the kingdom, right? And then from 39 to 53, he is replying to the sins of the family tradition get destroyed. So yeah, Krishna is giving the logic of Nishkam Yoga, saying, why do you worry? I mean, there's nothing, you cannot kill anyone, right? And then the 54 to 72 verse is where our verses 62 and 63 lie. This is where Arjuna just interrupts Krishna and then just speaks up to say, because Krishna is talking about Nishkam Yoga, so he is now talking about a person who is really doing something very serious in terms of spirituality. So he's asking about Sthit Pragya. What are the characteristics, right? And then the 54, so now we're coming down to even subsection of chapter 2. So the question that Arjuna asks is, the Sthit Pragya, he's trying to understand him better. What are his characteristics? Ka Bhasha, what is his Bhasha? What is his language? Symptoms. That is what he really means. The Bhasha language means that what is the symptoms of a person with Sthit Pragya. And 56, 57 is about Kim Prabhasheta, speaks. What are his reactions? How does he interact with this world? Right? And then 58 to 63, this is where our verses lie. Kim Asit, sits. Asit means sits. So in a worldly jargon, that is means how he settles down, how he controls himself, how does he do sense control. And then the 64 to 72, the verses ahead is Kim Rajit, walks. How does he engage his senses? How does he move around in this world? Right? So Sthit Pragya questions are the overlying or the immediate context under which our two verses 62 and 63 that we read. Okay. So now after that, now that we enter the contextual topic, now let's go down to even lower details. So one thing to note over here, this is the first time now that senses are being introduced as a topic into Bhagavad Gita. And senses is the most prominent topic in Bhagavad Gita in terms of footprint. If you notice, I think there are like, I don't know how many, like 140 or so mentions of this word. So we first need to understand what these senses are, right? So if you notice, from the Sankhya evolution of Prakriti, right, from Mool Prakriti, Buddhi comes, Mahat, and from Mahat, Ahamka. And if you notice to the three boxes on the left side, right, then there is this Ahankar is of three types, right? Sattvic, Tatsik, Tamsik, Rajsik. And from the Sattvic, after the Mana comes, and from the Sattvic and the, I think is incorrect. It says Sattvic, but I think it should be Rajasic. So Sattvic and Rajasic combinedly give to Gyanendriya and Karmendriya. So Indriyas are senses, but they have different aspects, right? So from Sankhya, there are 26 elements or 24 or 25, however you take it, including soul and super soul. But the Gyanendriya, the ear, skin, eyes, tongue, and nose, and the Karmendriya, mouth, arms, legs, excretory organs, and reproductive organs, they are the one that make up, that then utilize the Tanmatra, sound, touch, form, taste, and smell, to activate themselves in the bhutas, the space, right? Space, air, fire, water, and ether. So this is how the dimensioning of this entire material universe is done. And from our point of view today is, we're talking about Indriya, so we really focus on the Gyanendriya, Karmendriya. So we just talked about them, just a visual to understand, right? A touch, sense, hearing, smell, vision, right? Okay. So now we come to the complexity, these verses that we earlier described, right? Sorry, over here. Ka Bhasha. So now we're trying to lay further more immediate context to the verses. So what is the 58th verse? It is saying, one who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects as the tortoise draws his slim within the shell is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. Once again, to revise, we are talking about the Sthit Pragya characteristics, and this is the Pragya Pratisthita. That means Pratishtha means once again fixed. Pratishthan means when you establish something somewhere. So the consciousness of Sthit Pragya means one whose consciousness is fixed. So he behaves like a tortoise. And how does he behave like a tortoise? All his limbs are out, but as soon as he sees some material sense stimulation, then it withdraws the senses in, right? So that is the 58th verse. The 59th verse is about, though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment. This was the Kritim, what was that? The word that we were using in the previous verse 62. Kritim Daman. Yeah, so forcible, artificial repression. We talked about that, right? So even if someone does that, the taste for sense object remains, right? But seizing such engagement experience a higher taste, he's fixed in higher consciousness. Obviously, if someone's working hard for $1 million, you pay them $1 billion, they won't care about $1 million, right? Similarly, if someone gets a higher sense enjoyment, then they won't care about regular good enjoyment, right? So that is the 59th verse. And then let's go on to the 60th verse. So 60th verse is more about the senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry with the mind, even if a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them, right? So here is a kind of a negative aspect about the Sthit Pragya's sense control, right? And is the famous picture from Bhagavad Gita, right? The horses are the senses, and the reins the mind, and the driver is the intelligence, and the body is the chariot, and the driver is the somewhere sense consciousness, other places it says soul, but regardless, consciousness is is our gateway to the soul, right? So when a man of discrimination also who's trying to control them, the senses can lead themselves out. So there were senses really, no wonder, are the most important topic in Bhagavad Gita in terms of coverage, because they can take away a man of discrimination as well. Now we come to the next verse, which is the 61st verse, which is one who restrains his senses, keeping them under control. So this topic was sense control, right? So now Krishna is talking about sense control. And fixes conscience upon me is a man of steady intelligence. So now Krishna is the first time, I think, he's introducing himself. Matpara is saying, in relationship with me. So Krishna is so far talking more like a guru. Now is talking about the prayojan as well. So what is it that is the objective of this whole thing? First time he introduces himself as Matpara. Right? Let me just check if there's anything else. Yeah. So if you notice in this, there is a do's and don't, right? Keeping them under full control. So these are the restraining his senses, right? So restraining center is the don'ts, and fixes his consciousness upon me is the do part. And if you notice, we can do further introspection into this matter, especially not the don'ts, but the do's. What does fixing consciousness upon Krishna really mean, and why does it work, right? So first thing to note over here is, it is mentioned, and this is obviously in Hindi, so I'll translate it. If some jiva has his mati is into Vaishnava, so Vaishnava mati, that means he is his consciousness into Vaishnavas, or if he has devotee association, then his attachment to senses, Vishaya Asakti, will be turned into Bhagavad Bhakti Nishtha. That means it will be turned into Nishtha for Krishna. So it will get Bhagavad oriented. It will get oriented towards the personal form of God. And therefore, Vaishnava and not Brahmanism is the differentiating or the conspicuous aspect that converts a Brahmana or any spiritualist into getting oriented towards at least Paramatma and hopefully towards Bhagwan. Otherwise, they just end up at Brahmbuya stage, right? So this is one aspect. So that's one thing, that is a statement. The second thing is, why does it work, right? So the answer for that is Bhagavad Gita, Chaturshloki, right? The Teshan Evanukampartam, Ahavagyam Jantava, Ashamyat Bhavsto, Gyan Deepen Bhasvata. So what is Krishna saying is, I dwelling in their heart, destroy with shining lamp of knowledge, darkness born of the night. Because Krishna exists in the heart, but because of this special mercy, so Krishna heart, super soul, plus special mercy equals Nashamya Bhavasto. So he's doing the Nash, or that means he's dispelling the Tama of such a person. So because of this, that it actually works. In other words, if you not agitate, but if you act, I wouldn't say even activate, I don't know the right word for it, but basically if you start your interaction with Paramatma in the heart, then Paramatma being already present, and by this verse, Krishna gives his special mercy, the ignorance is born. And when the ignorance is born, that's when you realize that this photograph that we saw over here, the senses are leading everything, and I am not body, I'm not senses, and I'm away from the senses, right? So this is a very important discrimination that happens because Krishna is in the heart of a yogi, right? So that's one thing. Another aspect to note over here is that if someone practices Krishna consciousness, it is declared as the most auspicious means of deliverance. So we can see one Bhagavatam verse over here, SB 2:33. So what is the translation? For those who are wandering in the material universe, right? There is no more auspicious means of deliverance than what is aimed at in the direct devotional service of Lord Krishna. So it is saying Vasudeva Bhakti, Bhagavati. So when you do Vasudev, Bhagwan's oriented Bhakti, at that point of time, that is the highest deliverable. There is nothing better. So obviously, if it is highest, it will work even for lower scenarios, right? So this is the reason why this verse that we talked about actually works. Fixes God is a man of study intelligence. Why someone who is Matpara would then become Pragya Pratisthita? That is the reason. And these are the reasons that we found. I mean, there are many, but we just kind of picked up a few. And so basically, if you make Krishna the center of your life, then it works. But is Krishna the center of your life good enough? No, because it also depends on where you're drawing the line in terms of what your life is, right? A life could be huge. My family, my country, and then I could live my country instead of India, we'd call it, or America, United States of Krishna, right? United States of Vishnu Tattvas. right? Any state I can call out Vishnu Tattva, Narsimha, state of Narsimha, and state of Rama, and actually that is how Vaikuntahs exist, right? But if you start doing that, that itself is not enough. You really have to focus on the crux, and the crux over here that you're getting to is senses. And how do you focus on the senses? To understand that it's not life which is Krishna oriented, it is the senses have to be Krishna oriented. That is really being very focused, perfection. And how do you do that? By realizing that all these senses are meant to serve Krishna. And then we come to that famous verse from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, 1:12, and Sarvapadi Vidin Muktam, Tat Pratve Nirmalam, Rishikena Rishikesha, Sevnam Bhakti Ruchate. So Bhakti or devotional service means engaging in all our senses in the service of the Lord, because he is Rishikesha, the master of all senses. So how is Krishna the master of all senses? And why is Krishna not called the master of all false egos, or the master of all minds or buddhi, and the master of all mana? But even the mana is sattvic. Why is he called Rishikesha? Krishna Prabhupada talks about this because Indriyas are our is how we interact with the world, and it is the Indriyas that for a typical jiva who is conditioned, Baddha jiva, leads them away into this material world. So because these senses, just like all other aspects in the material world, come from Krishna, but because they're the most crucial part, that's why the Rishikesh aspect is very important, because senses are an equally important, it is under the proprietorship of Krishna, and therefore we don't own the senses, just like we don't own the mind intelligence. But senses are very, very important, but they are the one deluding, and therefore Rishikesh is a very important aspect about who we understand Krishna as. So just having Krishna at the center of life is not good enough. Also understanding that he is the master of our senses, and therefore we have to anyway invest into our senses, might as well invest it into service of Krishna. And that's when the objective is achieved. Okay, so senses with us in the center, and senses with Krishna in the center. If instead of us tasting things, we have Krishna taste things, and we get leftover left, because we are a servant, and servant eats only after the master eats, we get much higher satisfaction, bliss, fulfillment, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so with that, I think we laid down the context quite detailed. Now let's get back to the verses again. Let me pull up that verses once again. Okay, so we are back to these verses 62 and 63, which was our starting point. And we had started with a warning. And if you notice, why did this warning come? So the warning was because there were a lot of negatives mentioned over here, right? While control objects of senses, person attachment, and from lust and anger. So let's just try to understand how does this develop. Firstly, what is delusion? So that's very important, because delusion is not a very regular word that we use. When we talk about illusion, but delusion is a little different. So what is this delusion? So in the dictionary, it is called as an idiosyncratic belief, like almost like a mania or impression that is firmly maintained despite being contracted by what is generally accepted or as reality or rational argument, typically a symptom of mental disorder. So as an example of delusion, what is delusion? So it is said, for example, someone who is delusion might contend that the government is controlling our every move via radio waves, even with no evidence to support this belief, right? So that is an example of what delusion is. And let's just talk about how this spiritual fall down happens. So let me open this up. So if you notice, these two verses are not exactly about Sthit Pragya. The 54th to 72nd verse, all of them are talking about characteristics of Sthit Pragya. But these two verses are talking about negative. Why? Because this is talking about a person who's based on Purushartha. That means out of his self endeavor, trying to achieve Pragya, consciousness, which is Sthita. And if you do it self without Krishna coming into picture, then it is not stable. It is not Sthita. So let's go into that. So this really is, these two verses talking about someone who is not Sthit Pragya, but Asthit Pragya or Asthir Pragya, one that is not Sthit. So here's a person and he's walking down, and his Pragya is not Sthita, even though he may have done artificial repression. And because he will tend to meditate on sense objects, it doesn't have that higher taste, and the attachment will develop, and the lust will develop from that, and anger will develop from that, and then delusion, that's what we talked about, bewildered memory, loss of intelligence, and then he falls back to material pool, right? The conspicuous things to note about is the three color which are in bluish over here, right? So meditating on sense object, it is, chitta, so the heart it basically is consisting of the subtle body, right? The mind, intelligence, and false ego. So it has many activities. One is thinking. So this really is our thinking ability. When someone meditates on sense objects, this is thinking. When they develop attachment to it, then that is feeling. And when you develop lust, that is willing. So thinking, feeling, and willing. At the willing state only is where karma is created. So because as we noticed, we say soul can only desire. Really, it has awareness and it doesn't do anything. Soul doesn't eat, it doesn't talk, it doesn't move, it doesn't drink water, have Coca-Cola, play golf, watch soccer. So it really is a desire part, and this is the willing part. So thinking, feeling, willing is how our attention goes into becoming something karma. That's why a very famous phrase from Vasika Maharaj says, right? Where attention goes, where attention goes, where intention flows. Forgetting. Ashramada, do you remember?
Attention goes, energy flows.
Energy flows. Thank you, Prabhu. You are my savior. Otherwise, I was in the material pool. So thank you for. Right. So I think what is important over here is lust is the one that is blamed the most, but the one that is leading to lust is senses, right? That is it. Lust is caused by ahankara, but it is propelled by sense. So unless the senses are into sense objects, lust will not occur, and none of these other things fall into material pool will happen. Okay, so with that, let's just get out of this. So now,
so Prabhu, do you want questions from the audience if they have any questions?
We can take the questions now. I mean, I was thinking that I have some questions that I wanted to discuss and
okay. Sure. It's up to you.
Sure. So I think I would just want to talk about some conspicuous aspects about this. So we know that we talked about senses. We went into Delta. What are the various kinds of senses, right? We talked about these two verses about Asthir Pragya. But one thing to note about this is that these two verses are talking about Buddhi Nasha versus Buddhi Yoga. And if you notice, Srila Prabhupada translated Buddhi Yoga as Bhakti Yoga. So these Bhakti Yoga and Buddhi Yoga is a very conspicuous writing from Srila Prabhupada for this section of Bhagavad Gita. And these two verses talk about Buddhi Nasha. So that's one aspect to note. Another thing is the senses by very nature agitate. As you can see, Devati is talking to Kapil Dev when she's presenting her case. I am very sick of the disturbance caused by material senses, and because of this sense disturbance, I fall into the abyss of ignorance. So senses will naturally agitate. In other words, you cannot say that, hey, I will be able to control them or do this. And why is that so? Because of asat, indriya, darshanat. Asat means impermanent, temporary, and indriya means senses. So asat, indriya, darshanat means from being agitated by temporarily manifest senses of the material body. So that's one aspect to note, that senses naturally agitate. Another aspect to note over here is, we can talk about lust, but maybe we'll skip over the last part. Let me quickly go through this. So, you know how living entities conscious covered by lust, I think that's what it is saying. So this brings the concept of lust, and the lust is very important because Bhagavad Gita 18:51-53, this talked about how Brahmabhuvaya Kalpate happens, and this will not happen for someone who is into not delivered from Kamam Vimuchya. If they are not delivered from lust, then they cannot get to Brahmabhuvaya Kalpate. So in other words, you have to get past lust. And then once again, how do you get past lust? That is given in this verse from 341. O Arjuna, best of Bharatas, in the very beginning curb this lust by regulating the senses. So we come back to our topic of senses. While lust is our biggest enemy, the key to getting past it is by regulating the senses. So that's one thing. Now we talk about how to do this actually. So if you notice, there is we will get stimulus for enjoying our senses. And when that happens, how do you control in practical life? So here's one very practical advice. It's called traffic light surrender. So whenever there is any stimulus, then what we should do is first apply brake, red light, okay, and then we have to evaluate on the balance of the truth or reality, that is that stimulus really bhautik or adhyapik, that is it material or spiritual? And if it turns out to be spiritual, then we should allow it to us to pursue that, right? If it is Krishna Bhavana Bhavit, then it is okay to say yes to it. So very practical way of doing things, that whenever you get a stimulus other than from your what you see or do in your regular life, use this traffic like surrender. So that's one thing. And then another question that may be asked is one really secure? So I'm asking self questions, Prabhu. Here are some questions that I noted. I think they would be good to share, but then we'll take questions from audience as well. So we'll zip through them. One question that may be asked is someone is doing Vedic bhakti, right? Then can they consider themselves secure, right? And the answer to that is that not really, because by definition, even though Vedic bhakti is a safety zone, right? Because when you're doing Vedic bhakti, you will be protected. The dharma rakshata, right? So the dharma will protect you, but Maya will still keep testing you. So someday you may fail, right? Whereas when you do samarpana, the traffic light samarpana that we talked about, surrender to Krishna, then that safety zone is uttama, is the best, because mind is in control. So in other words, one is not secure when one is doing Vedic bhakti with respect to sense control. Another question that may be asked is, what's wrong if material desires keep getting fulfilled? So someone's lucky they were born with a silver spoon, and they are whatever, their dad was a CEO of some company, and therefore when they're 20-year-old and just passing out from college school, the dad makes him a VP of some unit, right? Or born to a prime minister or a very wealthy person, whatever be the case, right? So for such people, would you say that what is the wrong if their material desires keep getting fulfilled? Right? The answer to that is lying in Bhagavad Gita 2.14. Yeah, I think it's 2.14. Right? So it says, the non-permanent appears of happiness, distress, and appearance and disappearance of winter and summer. So this world is full of duality, and that's basically the answer. That if someone is lucky now, if they have a silver spoon, then for sure you're going to get a rusted fork soon in your life. So a good time now is not something to be enjoyed. It is basically an indicator of bad time that is coming. If you are the owner of a big, wealthy food manufacturing company, then you can rest assured that you're going to be getting born in Somalia-like condition later on. So because this book is full of dualities, the pendulum will go from one end to another. It's just a matter of time. In other words, we can say that time is the defining or discriminating aspect about something that is material versus spiritual. If you broaden the horizon of time, of your purview, then you will get to go beyond this duality. So that's another answer. And I have more questions and answers, but I think maybe probably right now we can just stop here and see if anyone else has any questions, and then we can go back. Prabhu, any questions? Anyone, dear devotees?
Let me see, Prabhu, online. Just let me quickly check.
Sure. Thank you.
We don't see any questions online. I just have a comment to make that, yeah, you have done research very well. You connected through Bhagavatam and the nectar of devotion, connected a lot of concepts. Yeah, that's a practical problem, right? I mean, increasingly the world is becoming all
sense-centered rather than God-centered.
all kinds of sense enjoyments, they are increasing. And in fact, there are some places where even your employers see that as a necessity, kind of,
You're right.
Right. So there are challenges, and from a practical standpoint, right? How do I decide what to do, what to not to do, right?
Good question, Prabhuji. So I think the answer that I know, my knowledge is limited, but from Mercy Srila Prabhupada, I think what Srila Prabhupada has said is that making the best use of a bad bargain. So we are stuck in this position. There's no point complaining.
Mm-hmm.
I have a body, I have a mind, and I like to do sense enjoyment. And so the best thing to do is to begin the journey away from materialism. And for that, we can start doing some practice of Krishna conscious, all of that, right? But the more important thing is your question doesn't go into the practices. Maybe I do 2, 3, 4 hours of practice, and maybe 8 hours of sleep and some hours of eating food. but there's still good 3, 4, 6 hours of time left in a weekday, with 12 hours in a weekend, where I can still go and do some sense enjoyment. What do I do in those times? So the answer comes down to, Prabhuji, is that you have to understand that you have to do the best use. And the best use, it just happens to be staying away. So I think one is something that I was saying against, now I will say for artificial repression. If you actually come out with blocks of time, find out the root causes of sense enjoyment. Cell phone, one. Can you come out with time slots that say between 9 a.m. and 12 a.m., I'm not going to look at my phone? But then that is impossible because today's world is connected. Okay, WhatsApp is one thing that I'm not going to look at, because any correction from WhatsApp can be cloned through regular phone call. Everyone has my phone call. If they need me in an emergency, then they can always call me. Otherwise, what they are reaching out to me is non-emergency. And there's nothing written in my astrological chart or a government rule, or Krishna has come and said, you must answer cell phone within 5 seconds. And if it is 10 seconds, you start by saying, sorry, Prabhu, I was actually in the bathroom. So why do you have to say sorry if you're in the bathroom? But the unwritten rule in this world is you have to pick up the phone and answer. So understanding that the rules of this world are not the right rules, it is a bad bargain. So if you want to say sorry, but don't invest. So choke these points that cause sense enjoyment. Cell phone, limited use, but it is a continuous use throughout the day. So pockets of time. TV, no TV, throw it out. Why do you need a TV? Right? So these things can be thought of as depending on different people's circumstances. If someone into sales and marketing, they probably cannot do no TV because their conversation will start with, oh, today's earthquake and how was things, right? So they have to be informed. But depending on that samay kal paristiti, we can put some breaks in our life where we think that we are slipping beyond what would be considered as purely pure. And even if it is going down from purely pure to just pure, then like doing chanting and watching TV or just chatting your WhatsApp, maybe even if it is my 17th round and I'm done with my 16 rounds. So 17th round, can I watch my WhatsApp? And no one's stopping it, but that is not being purely pure, right? So I think coming out with your own restrictions, that is why spirituality is called a science. We have to experiment with our own selves, and based on our own antakarana, with the what our chitta is and what is our material consciousness, we can come out with our own rules. But broad level thing is, don't do anything more in this world than you really have to. Whatever you can do, Krishna consciousness, do at some point of time, will become more pure. We can do 24/7. Currently we cannot. That's okay. But willingly, don't do anything in material world. If you're forced to do. For example, some people will travel to India because they have not met their relatives, even their own mother, even if it is for some time, and that they draw their boundaries once in 6 months or once in 1 year, right? But maybe you can do the other way around. You can put the ball in their court to say, hey, whenever you need me, tell me, I will come over there. And suddenly that 6 months may become 3 years or 2 years, right? But you may still have to go for a pilgrimage. But what I'm saying is, what is otherwise happening in the name of meeting my mother and father, who I have a duty to take care, suddenly over there, it also becomes a little bit of sightseeing and a little bit of photography, and all of these things keep coming. So the more you put your fingers into material world, the more it keeps pulling us. So however we can draw lines, there's no hard and fast rule, but it is all left to us. However quickly you want to. Dhruv Maharaj did it in 6 months, right? So that's the answer I can give everybody. So sorry, my limited knowledge.
No, that's good. That's a good answer. Yeah. So anyone else I don't know here has a question?
Otherwise, we can.
Yeah, you can continue with your own question and answer, Prabhu.
Sure, thanks. Okay. So one question that I had was, if we get happiness from material desires getting fulfilled, am I missing the love for Krishna? I'm perfectly satisfied. My material desire, I'm doing Krishna consciousness, whatever, 16 rounds, going to temple, doing some book distribution. I'm in good level of Krishna consciousness from any point of view, right? All the material desires also getting fulfilled. I'm getting a good job, wife, kid, family, whatever, highly respected in the temple, devotee community. So am I sacrificing something from the love of Krishna point of view? So the answer to that question would be, it depends on consciousness, right? For example, if you give prasadam to a very innocent child, right? He would think about his tongue and belly and eat it, right? Just because he's innocent doesn't make him spiritual, right? Or him or her, right? So if the child, even though innocent or not innocent, they are thinking that it's Krishna's mercy that they got the prasadam, then it becomes oriented towards love for Krishna. Otherwise, even though it is prasadam, even though the child is innocent, he is not really delving or her delving into the material world, that in itself will not define whether they are oriented towards the love of Krishna. It depends on the vritti, the orientation of consciousness. For example, Dhruv Maharaj, right? He wanted a kingdom, he got the kingdom, but when he got Vishnu, right, then Krishna consciousness really sprung up, like the Shaktipat, like the Krishna Shaktipat, and he did not want the kingdom anymore, right? So just because material desires are getting fulfilled, it doesn't give any indication about love for Krishna, but consciousness does. So that was one question's answer. Another question that is asked in this respect is it okay to use anger if something is not turning out right from Krishna conscious point of view? So I'm trying to make the case more complicated. You are a pujari or you are in some service, deity, dressing, helping team, right? And somehow you're seeing that something is not working out correct. Maybe the person who is dressing Krishna put the earring wrong, or put someone's that the turban is not right or something like that, right? And you're getting anger. So is it okay to use anger at that point of view? A complex question. There is, as we know, this world is Urdhmula Shakva, right? So it is a banyan tree upside down, and everything in this world is a permanent reflection of the spiritual world, and therefore even anger is coming from the spiritual world, and therefore spiritual anger is good. How do we know that? We are not there, right? Or at least I am not there. I am still in the material world, very much grounded. So for me to use anger and say I'm using it in Krishna's service, is that really spiritual anger? It's a very fine line. One, again, it depends on manasthiti, what is your internal consciousness. So so Bhakti Vinod Thakur has a different style, Shaili, right? He would use humble persuasion, right? Even though he's very strong, his style is not that of authoritarianism or autocratism, right? Whereas Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, instead of Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, his style of Shaili is that of Lion Guru, and he's known as a Lion Guru. He's very strong, and it is said that he used to walk down the streets of Calcutta. If there's any impulse, he'd hold them by the collar and say, why did you not, I mean, what are you doing? Why serving Krishna, whatever? And they'll all run away because he has a huge personality too, right? So he's a Lion Guru. He'll make sure that people just do what is right. He's not ready to sacrifice or compromise anywhere. Then Srila Prabhupada, his style is that of transcendental anger. So coming back to our question, he does use transcendental anger, right? But it's a judicious use, uchit prayog, right? And he would use the range of emotions, right? He demonstrated all of them. Shanta, silent. Then sometimes his lips will tremble, right? And sometimes just get plain angry. So there's a story about Srila Prabhupada. Once in the room, everyone is laughing, ha, 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 ho, and they're cracking jokes. Srila Prabhupada, and all the devotees are there, and they're cracking Bengali jokes, and no one was understanding them. Well, all of these devotees, disciples of Srila Prabhupada, they were all from the West, but they're still laughing because Srila Prabhupada is laughing, and ha, ha, ho is going on. And then Srila Prabhupada pressed the bell. And then he pressed the bell, ting, servant came in, right? And then Srila Prabhupada thundered and very angrily, call whatever that XYZ devotee from the room beyond. And then the servant immediately ran, and everybody was stunned silent. So what's going on? I mean, they were all laughing. And then, so the servant gets that disciple, and Srila Prabhupada rebukes him, right? That particular devotee, and just says, you need to be focused. And something like that he says, and then he says, you go, right? And then as soon as that person leaves, Srila again starts going back to his mood, and again laughter happens. Everybody started laughing. So the mood changing drastically. Why? Because firstly, this is the Guru Tattva is very heavy, right? When they really need to do something, they do it, and they do it very heavily, right? That's the literal meaning of the term Guru. And it figured out that that person who's Srila Prabhupada had got, he had some sensual problems, right? Vijaya problems. So Srila Prabhupada, being Srila Prabhupada, knows not just what's going on around him. Mystically, we know many, many things, right? So he knows something is not going good 2 rooms away. And then this is a story about him. So he goes very strong, and the mood swings are very quick, and not because he's a person from this world, but because he's a person from that world. So basically, we can be like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And I think there's a verse over here. I think at the end of the hour almost. But I think. Okay. So I'm missing one verse, but basically it goes like this, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has severe external tribulations, but internally he's experiencing bliss. And maybe and this is the verse. In this way, Lord Chaitanya is to revel in. So this is like the Anta or Madhya Lila, what is describing about. Lord Chaitanya is to revel in ecstasy day after day and exhibit these ecstasies before Swarup and Ananda Rai. Externally appeared severe tribulation as if he was suffering from poisonous effects, but internally he was experiencing bliss. This is a characteristic of transcendent love of Krishna. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu demonstrated this is the right way to deal with things. So maybe Ashwada Prabhu, this is coming back to your questions answer as well. So anyway, we are at the end of the hour. So one thing to note over here is, I think if you want a one-liner, we said that we have to control our senses, make them Krishna-centered, especially the senses. He's Rishikesha. But even more important than the term Rishikesha is this term called Adhokshaja. And the Lord is explained here as Adhokshaja. And this is where I think Hiranyaksh is striking the Lord. And Lord Adhokshaja stabbed him in the root. So what Adhokshaja said is, Srila Prabhupada says, beyond the reach of all material calculation. Basically, Akshaja means measurement to our senses, and Adhokshaja means that which is beyond the measurement of our senses. So once again, we come back to our sense topic. If you want to control senses, which is what our subtopic was for verses 62 and 63 from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, then orienting your senses in the service of Rishikesha, the master of senses, because he is beyond senses. He is the master, but he is not under control of senses. Senses serve him if they are oriented correctly. He is called Adhokshaja. And that, I think, is the culmination of today's small discourse. Hare Krishna.
Haribol Prabhu. Prabhu, there is a question.
Sure, Prabhu.
YouTube. I think it's a general, I think you have answered kind of that, but the question is Vaibhav Gupta Prabhu is asking,
Sure, Prabhu.
how can we eliminate delusions from life and build self-realization about yourself?
It's a big question. But if you just parse that question apart into parts, right? Delusion we talked about is where there is a forced understanding of something that is not correct. Okay, so that's the first part of the question. How do you move from delusion into self-realization? And really, if you look at it, this self-realization term is a very dubious term. It is not really self-realization, as I broke into three parts. When you say self-realization means who I am not body, I am soul. But the higher understanding of that is I am a servant of Krishna with whom I have sweet love relationship. So I'm going to take that meaning and then talk about how to move from delusion and go into that higher understanding of self is a servant of Krishna, Krishna Nitya Das. The answer is, in the short time, is making life Krishna-centric. To the best of our capabilities, with whatever facilities we have, whatever limited mind I may have, whatever limited intelligence I may have, whatever facilities I have, whatever senses I have, whatever mother, father, son, kid, money, whatever I have, the best use, put them into the best use, making them Krishna-oriented. And obviously, out of all of these things, senses is the most important thing to invest into Krishna. If you invest that, then you serve Rishikesh, you get to Adhokshaja, and he'll take you back. So, sum up, we cannot do it. We need someone from a higher up to do it. It is called mercy. All we are doing is acknowledging and accepting, desiring that this is the right path. That's all. Krishna is magically arranging all the demigods who will make us do all other things. He's magically arranging devotees, everyone. So from delusion to self-realization, trust Krishna. Believe in Krishna. That's it. Make Krishna-centric life. Haribol. Hopefully that answers Prabhu. Short time, I don't know, even have the capability to answer, but anyway, that's a short answer I could read. Thank you, Vaibhav Gupta Prabhu, for asking the question. So Prabhu, is it okay? We end now?
Yes, Prabhu. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. I hope you keep giving me mercy. Everything that I said comes from my understanding, limited understanding of what came from Acharyas. So thank you all for joining, and we can end with Vancha Kalpatrubhascha Kripa Siddhubhyo Vacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah.
जय दामोदर प्रभु की जय।
भक्ति की जय, श्री प्रभुपाद की जय, आचार्य परंपरा की जय, दैव प्रबंध हरि बोल, गुरु महाराज की जय।
Hare Krishna. We'll end the session, everyone, now.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.